questions. The presentation and a full recording of today's event will be made available on the UK Telehealthcare website. To share today's events, please use the @UKTHC News and the hashtags. So, to the first part of today's event, New Members Showcase. Just stop sharing my screen. So UK Telehealthcare are pleased to welcome Tech Cymru, our first national member, created in 2018 when it was recognised that the uptake of tech in Wales was inconsistent and lacked robust evidence. Tech in Wales, Tech Cymru was set up to provide oversight and direction for tech in Wales to support sustainable digital transformation at scale and pace. UK Telehealthcare look forward in supporting Tech Cymru. And I can see Aaron has started his presentation. I can see that on screen, Aaron, thank you. And I can see you. So I'll hand you over now to Aaron Edwards, who's the National Programme Manager, Telecare, to explain more. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Terence, and thanks for covering off the first 2 minutes of my presentation. I could talk about something.
Sorry about that.
Well, that's fine. No, I love it. Fantastic. Really good oversight and a good introduction to what we're about, so I can get into the meat and the bones of it now. But yeah, a big thanks to Terence, Julia, and Jerry, UK Telehealthcare team. It's been great so far, and we are looking forward to how we can continue our working relationship throughout the rest of the year and beyond. Okay, so over to the presentation. Just a bit of an overview for people who are not familiar with Tech Cymru. We're Welsh Government funded or sponsored, and we sit within NHS Wales. So we're hosted within the Aneurin Bevan University Health Board. We have 3 main programmes: NHS Video Consulting, just kind of where Tech Cymru made their name. That was born out of the necessity of the pandemic. There needed to be a national video consulting service aligned with the NHS. And that was Tech Cymru who rolled that out, delivered it, and continue to do so to this day. And it goes from strength to strength. And we're looking at alternative avenues now into the social care landscape, which is really exciting. We've also got a telehealth programme, which predominantly sits at the moment across the health sphere within Wales. But the lines, as we know, are increasingly blurred between telecare and telehealth. So at the moment, there's fundamental differences between both programmes, but sort of in year 3 and 4, I would assume within our programmes, there will be a natural kind of alignment in terms of how one can help the other. And then lastly is telecare. So that's the programme that I lead and I work on with my colleague Sarah Turvey-Barber, who's the National Head of Business Change and Engagement. And we've recently brought over a senior project manager who's got several years of telecare experience in Wales, who will be joining us in March sometime. So exciting times ahead as we continue to grow. The vision for Tech Cymru, and I'll try not to be too strategy heavy, because obviously I think I work on strategy on a day-to-day basis, but I want to make it relevant and exciting, as exciting as telecare can be. So the vision for Tech Cymru and the telecare programme is to be the centre of excellence for all telecare related activity in Wales. It's underpinned at the moment by sort of 6 key measures, but they'll change as we move and iterate. Number 1 is supporting with the digital migration. That is our priority. Access and support to embed a minimum telecare data set. I'll be discussing that later on within the presentation. Access to and support, to embed the business intelligence dashboard. Again, I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. We created a website, so there's some rich documentation and literature that's on there. Not just for our friends in Wales, people in England and Scotland can use that. There isn't a login barrier. You can just go on there and take a look and download and view and edit documentation at your leisure. Committed support from Tech Cymru to help with service delivery. That's a big one. That's kind of pretty much Sarah's day-to-day role, is going out there, winning the hearts and minds of service providers, showcasing what Tech Cymru can do. I sort of see ourselves, or we both see ourselves as free consultancy, so independent support. We're not affiliated. We've come from running respective services in Cardiff and Monmouth councils, so we've got that understanding of what it's like to be in the coalface. And we just want to try and help support services to offer better telecare provision to their service users. And then lastly is access to the latest market and sector intelligence. So working closely with the panel members today, amongst others, and just sort of having that independence, that sort of independent stance on what's going on within the sector. As we probably all know, anyone who's run a service before or worked in telecare, it's quite supplier heavy when it comes to the information that's being, given to you as a service provider. So we want to try and come in and just have that independent stance to say, well, yeah, that supply is good, but these are the limitations, etc., etc. And all in all, we want to try and arrive at kind of a best of breed type telecare service, which obviously includes equipment, etc. So again, this is very, very strategy heavy, but this is our strategy on a slide, if that makes sense. So this is pretty much the program summary. We have three main missions that underpin our program. They haven't changed since I came to post 18 months ago. We want to ensure telecare services in Wales are fully digitally enabled, comfortably ahead of the deadline. Welsh telecare services use common data standards and interoperable protocols. So we want that shift to widespread tech adoption, and we see openness as being key to that. Obviously without a compromise on information standards and safety. And lastly, their telecare services across Wales producing consistent BI data. So there's a lot of obviously dashboards floating around at the moment. That seems to be quite a buzz thing at the minute, mainly centered on the citizen, which is fine. That's great. That they are the most important person in all of this after all. But we want to try and insert a BI dashboard within the service themselves, so the service provider has access to unique insights and information that they can action. So the three main program themes, or the four main program themes, sorry, because it's all underpinned by that central one, engagement. We don't have a mandate to say to Welsh services, you must do this. It's more, you should do this, and these are the reasons why, and it's underpinned by that dedicated support that Sarah and I can provide. But digitalization is obviously the big initial one. Beyond digital, which focuses on the data standards piece, and then next generation telecare. I'm of a firm belief that you can't get to next generation telecare unless you digitize and you embed the data principles in our beyond digital theme within the program. There's no point sort of trying to run before you can even walk. We need to just make sure there's a level playing field there with solid digital infrastructure, solid data standards, and a consistency in the way in which services capture data and present that data and action the data. Underneath is a series of capabilities. I won't go into that. Capabilities in strategy land effectively means business change, so it's the change to the business. And then we've got our main four outcomes that ultimately will be measured on by Welsh Government. So we want a step change in data exploitation by telecare services. We want to accelerate a convergence across health and care services in Wales. So how do we join it better with our friends in health? And because we're sat in NHS, we've got an open door, hopefully, when we start trying to demonstrate the efficacy of telecare. So we want a more equitable, accessible and sustainable model of telecare. It's quite a tricky one, that. And it did sort of turn some heads when I first pitched it to our programme board. There isn't an equity within telecare in Wales. It's a bit of a postcode lottery. Someone who falls in Cardiff will have someone to come out and pick them up off the floor. That's not the case in Newport, which is next door. So it is at the moment a postcode lottery when it comes to cost, when it comes to the types of technology you can have. The Vale next door are now offering fully digital IP kit. Cardiff aren't at the minute because they've obviously still operating on an analog platform. So there's still that kind of, there's still that inequity in terms of the type of service. The quality is largely the same, especially if they're accredited with TSA, for example. But the technology and the types of services are different, and the costs are different as well. So we want to try and create a more of a level playing field. And then lastly, there are a set of proactive model processes. So we just want there to be a consistency in the way in which process maps are created and adopted. I've touched on the strategic themes. I won't go into it. This is just basically a holding slide to say there's the front page of the strategy. If you want to read it, it's on our website. The slide deck will be sent out afterwards anyway, and there's a hyperlink on there anyway as well. So yeah, there's multiple ways to access the strategy. Digitalization, that's a visual map of all of the 7 alarm receiving centres in Wales. There are 2 that outsource to, well, it's slightly out of date. Obviously, it's not Amica anymore, so apologies for that. I'll have to amend that. But we've got 7 control centres in Wales, ARCs, that cater for the vast majority of the 77,000 telecare service users in Wales. There's only 1,500 that sit just over the border in England at 2 of those services. So obviously you've got Delta there, the big one in blue, roughly 35,000 connections. You've got the North Wales Collaborative Agreement, Galw Gofal with 16,000 connections at North. And then you've got a cluster of other arcs in the southeast of Wales there. Caerphilly take calls from Monmouth and Newport. And then you've got a few standalone arcs like Cardiff, the Vale and Rhondda. Obviously, we worked with the Vale on migrating their platform. So they are with Innovation Umo, and our friends in the North Galw Gofal are with Legrand. So they're effectively 2 of the 5 arcs are digital ready. And Delta and Caerphilly are currently out to tender. So fingers crossed by the end of 2023, all the arcs in Wales will be digital ready, digital proofed. So that's the digital bit. I mean, I've not gone into too much detail there. If anyone wants to find out more information about how we can help, mainly extending to Wales at the minute. In England, we can help. Me and Sarah are more than happy to have catch-ups, because it's always good to understand what's going on across the border. The beyond digital bits are the crucial things for me. I think ultimately this is the transformational bit within our sector. We don't just want it to be a like for like switch. You know, we want to try, and we see this as an opportunity. If you're changing your platform full scale, and you're bringing in new in-home equipment models, let's start to have a think about the data. So we've got 3 main overarching projects that come underneath the Beyond Digital theme, which is the minimum telecare data set. So services in Wales capturing the same level of data. It's been co-authored with our friends in Scotland at Tech Scotland. So they've got a few more than us, but it's largely the same. It's largely close. There's just a few sort of nuanced details to do with the way in which obviously it's delivered north of the border. It's all well and good capturing the data. How do you present it? How do you visualize it? How do you get insight from it? So that's why we're also committing to creating a business intelligence dashboard using at the moment Microsoft Power BI for the first versions. And we've rolled that out in the Vale. They're currently underway, 3-month beta version that started this week. And we'll take the lessons learned as we obviously move that forward to a more of a permanent offering. And then lastly, a national common telecare records. We want to pioneer the concept of a common record. So spitting information out into the hands of health and care professionals in the field. We're a long way off that, and I know people have talked about it for such a long time, trying to be proactive and upstream and sending data out, this, that, and the other. I mean, at the moment, if you haven't got a standard data set, then it's just going to be an absolute nightmare, and it's not going to work. So as far as I'm concerned, the first step is to get a consistency in the data that service users are capturing. And if we can do that at national level, fantastic. So this is the minimum data set. We've got 54 minimum data set headings, and there's 572 secondary data metrics. So for example, the source of telecare referral, TC018 there, down halfway down, there's going to be multiple reasons that come off the back of that. So what we want to try and do is join those data sets up via the dashboard to give someone an insight. So data heading 1 plus data heading 21 gives you this particular insight. So that's how we want to try and sort of present the data in a meaningful way on the dashboard. So this will just be about how services capture it, how they should capture it. And at the moment, we're not far away from having this ratified with DHEW, Digital Health and Care Wales, as a technical standard. So what that does, it just adds an element of kudos to it. It's NHS Wales rubber stamped, Welsh Government rubber stamped as, this is the minimum data set for Wales. It's been ratified by the appropriate governing bodies. And effectively then, we can start shaping policy slightly around it then to say that this needs to be followed. You have to have the minimum data set. The vast majority of service users, service providers in Wales will capture a lot of this data, but it's just cleaning it up and making it consistent and ensuring that they're using the appropriate coding for it. And we'll also liaise with suppliers like Chubb, I know Sean's on the call, Chubb, Trevor and Legrand and a few of the others, Innovation, for example, and Tunstall, to ensure that the ARC platforms are capable of capturing the metrics in the way in which we want them presented. BI dashboard, as mentioned, just spitting that data out into a visual. I'm conscious I've got 3 minutes left, so I'll try and be quick with this. So the BI dashboard, this is the core reasons bit we've got here. As you can see there for the Vale, false alarms, information received, etc. We've got repeat faller information on the right-hand side there in the top right. So ID 5059 has come through 283 times in a 1 month period. So you can start by maybe 2 or 3 clicks understanding what a person is calling through quite a lot. What calls are they? Are they a lot of false alarms? Is it, say, a door sensor? Therefore, we need to go out and adjust the timings. Is it a fall detector? We need to go out and adjust the sensitivities. You can start getting some insights to stop preventing future false alarm calls and just make it a more useful sort of resource. This is the response service page, so the types of response services. So someone who's fallen, are they falling inside the property, outside the property, and the average response time. And then we've also developed a heat map as well. So you can see there the clusters tend to be around Penarth, Barry and Llantwit Major, but obviously it's a wider, more rural area. So where should you position your staff during a shift to get to someone quickly? At the moment, their average response time is less than 15 minutes, so they're doing a very, very good job. And this is a brand new response service for the Vale. They recently awarded a tender to St John's Ambulance to do this. They started it to October, November time. So we wanted to embed these, the data set and the BI dashboard early doors with the Vale of Glamorgan, following our collaborative agreement with them that we've got in place for their Rumo upgrade. There's a bit about engagement there. So there's just our strategic stakeholder map, who we need to speak to. Service providers and citizens, obviously the main ones. Then we've got other bodies like UK Telehealthcare, TSA, for example, Tech Scotland. Next generation telecare. I've only got a minute left, so I won't go too much into detail on this, but we've not even started scoping this initiative out. It's touched upon within the strategy, but we see it as being threefold. Response services, making sure that response services cover the length and breadth of Wales. Smart tech solutions. So how do we look at bringing in IoT, connected care platforms, for example, and proactive alerts? We want to move forward. I mean, you're not going to get proactive alerts appropriately if you've got rubbish data going in. You're going to get rubbish insight coming out, and we don't just want proactive services. You're ringing people. I know that's some services do that. We met with our colleagues in Seville the other day, the Andalusian telecare service, and they're struggling because it's been so successful, their proactive service offering. They're having to remodel. So we don't want to make those mistakes in Wales. We want to make sure that proactive alerts and proactive calls are centered around the data. So there's a genuine reason for you ringing that particular service user. There's some of our strategic priorities. The slide deck will be shared after. I won't go into it because I've got 8 seconds according to my timer. So I think I've done really well for time there. But there are main objectives for 23 into 2023, 2024. Thank you very much for having me, Terence.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you for keeping to time as well. There are no questions from the attendees at this time. There's a lot of information you've given there. And as you said, the deck will be shared. I'm sure the questions will come in later, but we'll forward those to you. So for now, thank you very much, Aaron.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'd like to now move on to our next new member, Progress Lifeline. Progress Lifeline is a personal alarm and telecare service provider who's been making a positive difference to the lives of over 65,000 customers for more than 30 years, supporting older and more vulnerable people to live independently in their own homes. So I'd like to now hand over to Catherine Scott. And I can see your presentation, Catherine.
Brilliant. Morning, everybody. I'm Kat Scott. I'm Head of Business Development for Progress Lifeline. Really pleased to have recently joined UK Telehealthcare as members, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity this morning to tell you a little bit more about Progress Lifeline. So firstly, just to give you a bit of background, Progress Lifeline are a business stream within Progress Housing Group. The group are a not-for-profit housing provider who own and manage over 12,000 homes. We've been delivering housing-related services to communities since 1994, and we're also one of the UK's leading supported living providers for people with autism and learning disabilities. We operate mainly in Lancashire, but offer supported living services nationwide, as well as delivering key worker accommodation. Although the group is made up of a number of companies and brands, we operate as one team, as an organisation, with many of our support services being shared right across the group. So, Progress Lifeline, we're an award-winning personal alarm and assistive technology service provider, providing monitoring services to over 65,000 people across the UK. In recognition of our high quality services, we've won numerous awards over the past few years. Last year, we won the iTech Award for Partnership and the NWEEG Award for Kindness. And prior to that, we'd also won the iTech Awards for Leadership and the Integrated Tech Service Award. So as a service provider, we provide assessment, installation, maintenance, monitoring and physical response services across the UK to a wide variety of customers, including our own self-funders, local authorities, health, housing associations, charities, and of course to our own Progress Housing Group tenants. We are equipment agnostic, so we use a variety of equipment, a wide range of equipment providers, all designed to best meet the needs and desired outcomes for our customers. A quality and person-centred approach are at the heart of everything that we do. We believe in providing value for money for our customers and pride ourselves on providing services to the highest possible standards. As a not-for-profit organisation, any surplus that we do make is invested back into Lifeline to support innovation and the development of quality services. As you would expect, we're accredited to the Tech Quality Standards Framework, and we've got nearly 200 staff members that are dedicated to delivering Progress Lifeline services. Much like everybody else in the industry, we're well underway with our digital journey and really excited about what the digital future looks like, both in terms of the technology and the insights into data and outcomes that we can achieve for our customers. It's a challenge and requires a significant step change in the ways in which we're delivering services, but it's a challenge that we're embracing wholeheartedly. We're in the midst of migration to a digital platform, and we're aiming to have 30% of our thousands of self-funders transition to digital equipment by the end of the financial year. We are currently on track to achieve that target. So in terms of monitoring, we've been providing monitoring services for over 30 years, so we've been at it a while, and our ARC, which operates from 2 sites in Lancashire, provides 24/7 monitoring and response services to individuals in their own homes. We've grown significantly over the past few years. We've always had an aim to grow the service, but with that focus on quality and value for money. And in recent years, we've experienced significant growth in both our self-funders and our commission services. Our ARC handles over 130,000 calls a month, with around 70,000 of those being inbound reactive alerts to assistive technology devices. We also provide out-of-hours support for housing providers and local authorities, providing repair support, homelessness services, a variety of other things. Our team in the ARC is managed by a service delivery manager, who reports into our head of operations, and they're supported by 4 team leaders and more than 60 operators, ensuring that we always have adequate staff available to deal with inbound and outbound call requirements. To move on to our physical responder services, which is an area in which we're particularly proud of. We've been providing response for over 10 years, and we now support over 24,000 people with physical response services. Following from feedback from the TSA at last year's audit, we believe we're the largest provider of physical responses in the UK. Our responders are all fully trained in first aid, moving and handling, and provide lifting services using specialist lifting equipment as required. We provide responder services across 6 counties in the UK, and that's expanding all the time. Our responder teams are managed by 2 service delivery managers, 2 team leaders, and we've got over 60 responders providing on-call services around the clock. We attend about 1,400 call-outs every month. And of those call-outs, around 70% of those are falls related. Alongside our responders attending to call-outs that are associated with incoming calls into the ARC, we also receive referrals directly from ambulance trusts who send calls straight to us from their call stack if they're aware that it's somebody that's suffered a non-injurious fall. And we also take direct referrals from care homes and from domiciliary care agencies. Again, if that's the predicament where somebody's fine, they're uninjured, but they're on the floor and need some assistance getting back up, then we'll go out to see them. This essentially means that people that are suffering non-injurious falls don't necessarily have to have some sort of assistive technology in the home to be able to access our services. Over the past year, we've been part of the TSA pilot for the decision support tool, so working in partnership with UCRs to help with defining the response pathways to somebody other than ambulance services. The way in which this works is that we utilise the DOS, the Directory of Services, to refer to the urgent community response teams. These are multidisciplinary teams that have been set up by NHS England to move care away from ambulance trusts and relieve some of the pressures that we all know that they're facing. The teams work between the hours of 8 AM and 8 PM, and they provide a wide range of clinical services in the community. We work with numerous UCRs across different regions, and also the UCRs referring to us for people that have suffered from non-injurious falls and need some support in getting back up. So our responders will go out and handle those call outs. We were requested to engage in this pilot due to our extensive service delivery in terms of response, and our head of operations sits on the special interest group, the TSA, with regards to the pilot. We've seen some really great results, both from the expansion of our emergency home response services, but not least the reduction in ambulance call-outs that we're achieving. Of the thousands of emergency calls that we receive on a monthly basis, we only refer 0.6% of those to the ambulance service, which is significantly lower than what the industry standard is. So that's it. That's a whistle-stop tour from me on all things Progress Lifeline. I think we've probably got a couple of minutes if anybody's got any questions, or if not, I shall just be rewarded for keeping to time. Thank you.
Definitely for keeping to time. Thank you, Catherine. At the moment, I'll just make sure, but there are no questions. As the previous presentation, Catherine's presentation will be shared, so you can have a look through that, and if you want to send any questions after the event, we will forward those on. So for now, thank you very much, Catherine.
Thanks very much for listening to me. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'd like to move on to our next presenter, our final new member for today, and that's from Evendos. Evendos is an established provider of prescription compliance systems in Finland and the Nordics, and are now introducing their products in the UK. And I can see Kim has started his video. Could you start your presentation, please?
Yes.
So Kim is the Business Development Manager, and shortly I'll hand you over for Kim to explain more.
Can you see the presentation now?
Not at the moment.
No? Now?
Still not. We can ask Julia to start it for you. Looks like it's started.
Now?
I can see it now. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you for UK Telehealthcare for having us as a member, and my name is Kim Nars. I work as a Business Development Manager for Evendos. And we are providing automated medicine dispensing robot. And why are we here is that we are looking into the UK market, trying to learn more about it, and also trying to look with it like different kind of partners to establish some kind of pilots and trials around different regions within the UK. Shortly, where everything started was over a decade ago with our founder, who's still working for Evendos, is that he really saw when he was spending a lot of time with his grandma that there was this basic dosage boxes used, and when the care provider came over, they were focusing a lot of medication on dispensing them and putting them in the right boxes. So it took a lot of time, and actually the focus was not in the patient, but it was more in the medication. So this is also a different thing in Nordics, what's compared to UK. So basically in UK home care segment, you are not at least yet managing medications at home, but this is done in the Nordics. So basically the presentation is more from the Nordic model, but there is same issue is in UK as it has been in Nordics and is still so. Shortly about Evendos is established in 2008. Our turnover last year was over 22 million. So we are like not a startup company anymore. Last year we were also listed as one of Europe's fastest growing companies, and within MedTech we were the second fastest, I guess. Through our robot network, so these are like robots based mainly at patients' homes, so they can be supported by the medication, but we have dispensed over 20 million medication pouches. So these pre-packed medication, these kind of plastic bags. We have over 160 employees, and we mainly, our customers are municipalities, at least in Nordics. So we have about, a bit over 300 municipalities we are working with. Now our headquarters is in Finland. We also have an office in Helsinki, where I'm based now. And we have also an office in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. And then we have a partner in Iceland we are working through. So these numbers are basically what is from Nordic. So we have the government or municipalities basically responsible for patients' medication at home. And the reason why they support their medication at home is that they see the savings from hospital cost, or they can keep people longer at their home rather than moving over to a care home, which is more expensive. So within the Evandos history, we have dispensed over 20 million sachets, and our medication adherence through our clients is over 99%. So it's very high. So this equals about 600,000 saved working days in the Nordics. Some history of the business idea started. We have a prototype, but mainly in 2014 we got the CE mark. We are also classed as a medical device class 1, so we can be, for example, utilized in UK high interest of testing us in hospital discharge models. We have subsidiaries in the Nordic countries, as I said, and nowadays our main shareholder is Verdane, which is a Norwegian fund that is supporting our growth abroad Nordics. We also released a new version of a medicine dispenser with a video assisted call function, so you can actually, for example, monitor the medication intake. So this example is from the home care setting. So basically the robot is based at the patient's home, and it is refilled by these multi-dose sachets, or you call them more pouches in UK. So these are packed by either a pharmacy or this kind of like blister center. So then when the home care provider is visiting the patient's home or nurse, so they can refill the robot. Basically in Nordics, we have every second week is like a refill moment for the medication. And then the robot is reminding the patient when it's time for taking the medication. There is a medication window for this. So in the end of the closing time, it starts reminding more that it's time to take your medication. And with the help of this, people who like to take the medication on time but simply forget has like huge support of this. And in case the patient does not press on the green button when it's active, so then it will send an alarm to the Evandos telecare system, and then the care provider can then follow up on why the patient hasn't taken their medication. And Evandos is providing 24/7 support also for the care provider who is visiting the patient's home. So basically what Evandos is, at least in Nordics, is mainly about supporting patients' independence. So people tend to want to be at home, and we support that cause, because in the big picture, the government is also doing a lot of savings when people are more independent. So basically the reason is that when you're living at your own home independent, there's no cost to society, but when you come into home care, then costs start to increase. So this segment we are basically trying to extend, so people can actually stay longer at home, but also we can provide more services to the home. Instead of having people then going into care home, which is more expensive for the society, and even talking about hospitalization costs, then we are like having huge costs. So what the benefits is of Evandos is that it guides the client in taking the correct dose at the correct time, in the right amounts also, which ensures then high medication adherence, as we have from the over 20 million pouches we have dispensed is like over 99%. This, of course, is then the medication management is safer and it's better for the patient safety. This also frees up the nursing time. So you can actually use then the time to spend more time with the customers that actually needs the time and not managing their medication. Then also, if needed, physical medication dispensing visits can be decreased. And then we have in Nordics, at least, where we have a lot of nurses traveling around, so we save a lot of travel time related to medication tasks. And also because the nurses can do the visit based on the time they have, like sufficient time to do that, instead of going to visit the customer when it's time to take medication. So this also then increases the employee satisfaction as they have more control over their primary work. Here is an example of a municipality we work with, and here you can basically see the yellow lines is the morning rush hours, which are usually very stressful for the nurses. So before starting with Evandos, there were a lot of morning visits. Even in the first phase, midday and afternoon and evening visits were decreased, but all overall, like, visits were decreased. And in the second phase, what they actually wanted to achieve is to have the nurses spend time with those patients that actually need the care time. So the visits were decreased, but also the timely matter that was spent with the client was increased. From Nordics, we have a lot of studies of these segments within the home care. Here is an example of a municipality. I can actually send this to UK Telehealthcare and you can request the research from there. But in this case, there was 457 days of like a pilot that took so long. And there was some patients dropped off that they, for example, went to hospital or so on, but approximately 17 patients was within this study, and the adherence rate was 99%. And for those cases, they did not take medication. Everyone was sent the alarm. So then the care provider actually followed up on this alarm, and not a single dose during this 1.5 years was missed. Then there is the Swedish Institute for Health Economics study, where they conducted that for 4 municipalities when they study with 229 dispensers, and the result was good, with where they saved like 22 hours of work per month per robot. So that's a high number to have some cost savings on, and these are like numbers I showed you earlier that was based on the saving time within the Nordics. Then a private company working in Stockholm had also a pilot study where the adherence rate was also high, 0 reported medication errors occurred, and they could actually, as you know, that at least in Nordics and also UK, there's like a lack of nurses, so they could actually increase their client base with 11% by implementing more robots into their service. And also they saved a lot of driving hours and hours of care work, as they could automate this medication. Then there was a municipality federation in Finland also, where they could save the work input of 7 to 9 care nurses was released like for other tasks. The point is not to make nurses unemployed, but like to support them in their primary work. And here was also about decreasing the visits. So morning rush hours are very like stressful for the nurses, so they could actually use the time to spend more time with people in the afternoon, for example. And during this study, it occurred also that the people who used Evandos device compared to those who did not, so their well-being level was more stable. And this is probably because the patients has taken their medication as the GP has prescribed. And there is, of course, more variations when you're trying to follow up on your own medication. Here is basically the robot, how it looks. The new version has also a video camera integrated here. It works as a locked medicine container, so only people with access can open it. So if you try to break into it, yes, of course you can do it, but it will send also an alarm then to the care provider. So people who log in can refill the robot, as usually they are caregivers or then registered nurses. And then we have a touch screen on the robot, so you can, for example, send simple messages to remind to take water, or for example, if you have liquid medication, remember to take those. And in case then the medication is not taken when this green alarm or green button is active during the medication window that is printed on the medication pouch, so then it will actually go to a locked container when it's not anymore safe to take the medication. So then also at this point, the care provider gets an alarm. And what usually, this is an example of the Evandos telecare system. So what you can see from it is that the total amount of sachets taken, what is the compliance level, how many pouches are taken average per day, and how many are untaken. And you get like all kinds of data. Everything that is happening is logged in the system. And also like travel time, we have, for example, if you're going to daycare or lunch, you can activate this travel mode. So you can take your next medication, for example, with you and have a reminder to your phone. But within the community or municipalities, so basically the clients, they can live longer in their own home and they are less dependent on nurses. It will assure that they will have their medication and right medication on time. With the nurse, they can actually focus on the care rather than the medication. With the help of dispenser, they can plan better their day, which time they're visiting their clients. And for hospital, for example, can be used for hospital discharge as you can like reduce the visits rather than going always to check on the client. For example, we had a case in Northern Ireland where they have interest to test it, that NHS was discharging patients to their home, but they would require 4 visits to keep up to the patient, but there was only resources to do 2. So then there would be an opportunity to have Evandos there and handle like 2 of those visits by dispensing medication automatically. And then for doctors, of course, all medications they can see that the GPs that what medication they have prescribed, have they been taken, and then it's easier to follow up on the well-being level. Yeah, that was shortly what Evandos is doing. And here is my contact details. And as said, so we are looking for some pilot trial partners in the UK and happy to talk with anyone interested in these kind of services. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. We have a question, well, two questions from Angus Honeysett at Tunstall. First part of the question is, how many pharmacies are part of the program and how do you recruit them?
So in UK, we don't have yet any ongoing activities, but mainly it depends on the model, but we usually don't work with pharmacies because it's more that the home care who is providing the service to the client at home, so they can actually receive their medication from any like pharmacy. And usually when talk with pharmacies, of course, they are interested in supporting this cause so they can serve their clients better, as long as they have this multi-dose packing machine in place. Yeah, probably answered the question, but yeah, so we don't have like yet.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the second part is, how do you ensure compliance?
Basically, compliance is measured on when the patient presses on the button. So usually, at least in Nordics, when nurses visit the patients, they can check that they have, like, for example, put the empty sachets next to the robot. But the thing is that when we start pilots or increase patients, we do a customer selection with Evandos and the client. So we have actually patients selected who wants to take their medication. So if they don't have the interest or taking the medication, then they might be suitable for using Evandos. But in that sense, we also developed the video dispenser, so you can actually monitor that they actually take it. But the adherence is based on the press of the button.
Thank you. Another question, this time from Kate Baker. What is the cost of the medication dispenser and who fills the dispenser? Can a family and home carer do this?
So in Nordics, our customers are mainly municipalities, so they are paying for the service, and it is actually tendered within the Nordic countries, and the prices for the Evandos dispenser, Evandos telecare system, and 24/7 support is around 200 euros. So that would be £160 maybe. And here, the care providers are actually receiving the medication from the blister packing center. So when they do the visit, they actually they take the medication with them and refill it at the same time. But this is something we provide a service for the caregivers. So we have never tested that family members would refill it, but that could be maybe an option to look into. But mainly the visiting nurse or caregiver who would do the refill.
So thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you for your time. Good questions.
Thank
you.
So that's the first part of this event, New Members Showcase. So thank you to Aaron, Kath, and Kim. I'd now like to move on to the second part of the event. And the second part is the analog to digital transformation. I'd like to ask Mark to start his video, and for the panelists to also start their videos. If you can keep your mics turned off for the moment. Okay, I can see you now. I'd like to now hand over then to Mark to start the second part of this event. So Mike, if you could start your mic, and I'll hand you over to Mark Bannister, Tax Advisory.
Thank you, Trevor. It's a pleasure to be able to chair this session. The aim is to create an opportunity for you to question major tech suppliers on how they plan to support customers through the analog to digital transformation. And that's both in terms of the practical issues around the upgrading of the national telephone network, but also on how they are able to support providers to implement next generation solutions and to develop next generation service models. So we've got a strong panel. David Hammond, Chip Tech, Richard Bailey from Telealarm, Carl Ryan from Essence Smart Care, Trevor Hoggard from Legrand Care, and Sean Moscrop from Chubb Community Care. We've already had quite a number of questions through, so the plan is to deal with those questions first, and then if we have time at the end, to take further questions from delegates. And what we're asking you to do, please, is to submit those through the chat, and then Trevor will filter those out and present them during the session if possible, but otherwise, if it's not possible, then we'll circulate those to the panel after the session, and they'll get back to you. Okay, so first question we have is from Christian Knight, Mediquip Connect. And the question is, bearing in mind that SCIP, which I believe is IP device, is cost between £140 and £250, are there any plans to rationalise the pricing of telecare units? And I guess that's important because that is quite a big step up from the price of a traditional analog unit. And I guess in times of inflation and financial pressures, that's going to have quite an impact on business models in the sector. So could I first put that to David Hammond from Chip Tech?
Cheers. Thanks, Mark, for the difficult question at the start. That's great. Lovely. No, hey, look, it's a good question, and we often get asked about this. I think, you know, we've got to be honest and put the elephant in the room. and the reality is that digital units cost more money to make, period, you know, and you'll see that across all providers that are in the market. I think on top of that as well, you know, we all know that we've gone through quite an unprecedented time recently, namely with COVID, and of course with the conflict in Ukraine as well. I can tell you for sure, you know, in terms of component level, and often this doesn't get shared within the industry, Chip Tech as a supplier, I know that some other suppliers as well who I've spoken to, you know, we've seen increase in components going up 20% plus, as well as difficulties to go and get it. So the reality is, it is what it is. It's within all product providers' interest to make their units affordable and to enable the shift from analog to digital. And we're doing everything that we can to reduce those costs. So, you know, what can we do? So on a Chip Tech perspective, of course, we're always doing things to try and reduce supply chain costs. We're also doing everything that we can to make our products quicker, more efficient, but still maintain the safety standards that we need. But innovation comes into it, and innovation is process, it's service provision, and it's technology. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So Chip Tech, we set up all our units as an example. So every single order that we get come in, we configure units, we manage IDs, we apply firmwares, we do branding, we test the monitoring center. So essentially, all of that pre-work that goes out, the costs that's associated with it, we try and take that away. So we're trying to provide a saving on that. In terms of technology, most of you will know voice guided install. It's quite a unique offering from Chip Tech. This enables cost savings through self-installation. It's been incredibly successful throughout the industry, and we're really pleased with it. That's why you see it in 7 from Eva that we produce. But you know, there's a cost saving there. We've got to start adding all these cost savings up. On top of that, in life cost savings. So what does digital bring? This is not just Chip Tech, this is throughout the industry. You start to think about the saving of visitors going out to site to make changes. They could be timer changes for more advanced telecare. They could be firmware upgrades. They could be, you know, it's simple as pairing pendants on site, all of this type of stuff that can be done remotely. That saves a lot of money through the visits. Plus it ticks the box in terms of the green agenda as well, which is what we should be doing. And finally, and I'll get off my soapbox, we really do everything that we can, not just on capital cost, but on recurring cost as well. SIM costs have also been an addition to digital telecare. And that's brand new as digital has come. So we've innovated our 7 products. We've got a dual SIM in there. Both SIMs are roaming, both on different core networks. This type of innovation, you know, means that issues that we've had recently, you know, with connectivity going out, you know, we remember Tele2 and recently a GDSP Vodafone outage. 7 enables the 2 SIMs enable us to be able to mitigate against that issue. But the innovation's not just in the technology, we've been able to offer that at the same price. So in a nutshell, we're doing everything that we possibly can. And as savings come in, we'll always pass that over to our customers. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you very much, David. So it's the case that as a supplier, you're doing everything you can to minimise the cost to your customers, but to a certain extent, the savings and the ability to cope with this really is partly also about service providers rethinking their business plans, or business models, and restructuring their services around some of the benefits that digital can provide.
Yeah, without question, 100%. You know, the move to digital is not a like-for-like swap from an analog-based unit to a digital unit. It brings a lot more. And whilst that innovation and change of process happens at production level and technology level, it also is over at service level as well, and that can drive cost savings for sure, without question.
Yeah, no. So we did have a question just pop up there from Michael Swaffield, which might be helpful to address now, which is about the reliability and advice that you're able to provide to customers about the reliability of digital products. And I know that your main offer is digital care phones.
I think the big thing, you know, we're going to talk later on probably about the benefits that digital are going to bring, certainly in the future with common data sets and so on. But in terms of reliability and what digital brings, it's a phenomenal already step change in what digital brings you in for safety. So, you know, we've got an always on connection. I just talked before about the dual offering with our 7 device as well, meaning that devices are always on. So never before in the analog world were we able to pull over from alarm receiving center or into our own cloud DMP type devices to make sure that units are on always. So we can make sure that that happens. Plus we've got the ability as well to be a lot more clever in terms of digital and the way that we're pushing IP messages to different places. So that's on now. So that's it's proven. We often demonstrate, of course, we demonstrate that as we're onboarding and we're showing our customers what digital bring. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Thanks very much. There are a number of other questions coming through, but perhaps we'll deal with that as we go along later. Hopefully, because we started earlier, there's going to be the opportunity to open things up at the end of the session. So just taking the spotlight away from you, David. Second question is from Mark Baker, Elmbridge Borough Council. His question is, what extra benefit will we receive from the additional cost of your digital equipment and associated SIM fees that comes with it? Sort of the other side of what we've just been discussing. I wonder, Richard, could you address that, please?
Yeah, hi Mark. Big thanks to UK Telehealthcare team for hosting the event and allowing me to talk about my favourite subject. So benefit versus cost. I think it was 2018 that we ran a series of awareness sessions and Mark Baker attended one of those sessions. And at roughly about the same time, we launched our TA74 family of digital devices. So 5 years on, we have a huge wealth of knowledge on the digital connectivity, and we've got tens of thousands of devices connected onto our cloud portal from the UK and Ireland. I'm going to tackle this from a support perspective, and from support, the benefits are huge. And I think, as David said, one of the big real changes is the cloud portal. And it's been a real game changer for us as a company, but also our customers. Myself, Chris and Dave, we all have technical backgrounds, and Chris and I have worked in the service for many years ago. And I wish we had a cloud portal back then, because we could have probably saved about 50% of our service visits. We've introduced an out-of-hours support number, and if a customer has an issue, they can just give us a call, and usually we can solve it by logging onto their cloud account, and within a few seconds we can see what the issue is and help them through that. Yeah, the ability to remotely support our customers saves a huge amount of time and money. We hardly get any devices returned under warranty. There's usually problems and simple mistakes by installers can be solved quite quickly. In the past, it may have meant having to swap out a unit and return it back to the office for investigation, defaulting, and so on. So we can now do things like check the signal of the mobile phone network, where the unit is located. Is it in the right place? Can it be moved so it's got a better signal? Things like that. But one of the things I would say is that the cloud programming portals cost money to run. Last year, we sold over 100,000 digital devices in 20 different countries. We've got hundreds of thousands of devices constantly sending and receiving data to our cloud services, and the SIM revenues contribute to the server and maintenance costs. If I move over to sort of talk about the longevity of the lifetime of the device, as David said, firmware and feature updates allows devices to be updated to the latest version. So a tele-alarm unit purchased 5 years ago when we first launched them can have the same new features as the ones purchased today. Yesterday, we were factory acceptance testing the end-to-end encryption with innovation with their team. We've implemented the TS 50134-9 protocol with TLS encryption. So I don't want to get too technical, but any tele-alarm device can be updated with the new firmware that allows this end-to-end encryption. Without a digital connection, none of that would be possible.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. That's very helpful. That's a very full answer to that question. Just before I move on to the next question we received, John Griffiths just popped in a question that you missed the difference in price of analog compared to digital home sets. We didn't actually say what that was. I think my analysis was it was a lot more, but you know, kind of if you're talking about costs for an IP device between 140 and 250, I know that in the past we were able to get good quality analog devices for well under £100. So yeah, that is really significant when you know that your pricing power, when, for example, you're looking at private subscribers, isn't that great. There's a lot of competition out there as well. So it is a significant issue, I think, for the sector, and I'm sure it's going to potentially even drive people out of business. So it's great to hear that kind of there are things that providers can do using the new functionality in the digital world to reduce their operating costs, to mitigate some of that increase in the price of the connections. So I hope that's okay, John. So thank you, Richard.
No problem. Thanks.
Moving on. Next question was from Phil Kane at TalkTalk. And the question is, do panelists understand the need to test new and old equipment on IP networks in advance of the switchover to digital? Just going back to the question that Michael Swaffield asked earlier, which sort of relates actually to this, which he was asking about the advice on the reliability of analog devices when telephone lines are switched over to digital, which I think is very important, because my understanding that not all these units are going to be replaced before the switchover, and there are going to be analog units in service after the switchover, unless things change dramatically. So anyway, Carl, perhaps you could address the need to test and new and old equipment, and any ideas around what advice Essence are giving to customers with analog kit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think the obvious answer there is the more testing, the better. We're at Essence, we're in a enviable, maybe that's a subjective term, position of we've never supplied any analog equipment. We're always been full end-to-end digital right from the beginning. So we don't have a big portfolio of analog equipment out there that we have to speak for to be able to do that. So perhaps in a different position to other people here on the panel. But we kind of look at this from 2 points of view, really. As suppliers, we have that responsibility there to test in Phil's position there at TalkTalk, but across as many different places as we can. As we're testing in a digital world, you're adding the end user's broadband connection, whether that be a hub or through Wi-Fi. You're adding a different provider to that dwelling. You're adding a different provider perhaps to the local exchange there. So there's a myriad of different portfolios that could be needed to be tested, and also So obviously, the more testing, the better be able to do that. So we, at Essence, we will provide equipment for our customers and partners to test themselves as a free products there for them to be able to do that as a free trial, to be able to test what's going to be in their local area for their specific situation. And we will also pass on information from the testing we've done as a manufacturer. We see, obviously, as a manufacturer, we see the value of that, but you're getting our slant on that, or you're getting a manufacturer's slant on that, however that fits, not knowing that specific localization. So we also encourage, with our support, if required, for our partners and customers to run their own ideas around testing of what they want to do also. And this generally comes up from a point of view of what we're doing about the swap from plugging into the wall at a PSTN level to plugging into a broadband hub or into a wall at a digital level on the line. We also encourage people to test what's happening around a cellular connection as well. So the Essence equipment, we enable you to use whatever SIM and cellular connection you want to be able to do as well. So we encourage our customers and partners to find the right connection for them, whether if that's going to be a cellular connection or the combination of a cellular and a plug-in connection, whatever our partners and customers see fit to use. So that adds, again, complexity into how we're doing that. So we want to do that on a very localized level. And part of our service we provide to our customers is that we will guide them through that as they purchase from us, and they can try before you buy, to be able to do that before they make what we've already talked about is a big investment in the change here. And also that gives our customers chance then to see, as well as technically what's their best way to connect to the outside world, commercially what's best for them to connect to the outside world as well. So as we've touched on, there's a cost price of kit. There's also a cost price and often ongoing price for connectivity. So there's a choice there to be made if you're an Essence customer or partner, to be able to say, look, there's a different choice of what you want to do. Adds to the complexity of testing, which I'll come back to the start. The more testing, the better. The more localized that testing can be for specific circumstances, the better, is our point of view from Essence.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl.
Mark, I'll just add into that. Carl's bang on right in terms of the testing there. You've got product providers that'll go to the labs, do the relevant testing. A lot's been done there on the analog bit. And there's also new testing that's starting to take place over on digital as we migrate over to 4G, and that'll be over to 5G as well. I think in terms of independent testing outside of product provision, I think that's a really good call if people can do it with guidance and with help. You know, taking care, I can tell you've done a phenomenal job with that, where they've taken all of their different bits of equipment that are out in the field. They've done independent testing away from just the product providers' results, and they've run those tests, they've published them, and they've produced guidance for them. You know, so really good, best in class there that goes way above and beyond what the product providers do. So the more testing, the better. Just the final bit for me to add there is that you can only test what you know to test. Yeah. So, you know, if you go and put routers in the way on a wired connection, then how do you know what routers are currently out there to go and test? There is a myriad, there are so many different setups that are in people's homes. You can test a broadband connection, but can you truly test the full end-to-end of what it's being plugged into, if it's going into an 88 gateway or whatever? So people have just got to be mindful of that. And for me, risk aversion is generally remove the risk.
Yeah.
So I'm with David there, Mark. I think once you start to pull at that thread, there's so many different variables that can come across. It might, and the stuff that that Sean's done at AXA is great, what he's done there. And I think Aaron's done a lot of testing technically about what's in there. Maybe a point for Jerry and Terence and the team to say, can we share this? Is there a major pool of data where all that kind of stuff, where there's lots of different testing going off, where we can share all of that data? Bigger the data, the better for people to share in that, if it's possible, if it's not too commercially sensitive.
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, can I just say, Mark, I think the point David just made as well about testing routers. There are so many routers out there, and we've got absolutely no control over what routers are in a service user's premises. We don't know the passwords. We don't know if they're reliable. They're certainly not a safety critical device. So it strengthens the argument, in my opinion, for the use of SIMs as well in an alarm unit, so you don't have a single point of failure.
Yeah,
and it also ensures you've got that connectivity as well.
Are you still getting orders, Trevor, for analog units?
We don't supply analog units.
All right, so you stopped supplying analog. Right, okay.
So we supply just the IP unit.
Right. Okay.
Is it worth mentioning there, Mark, that the telephony into the call centre can be as critical as the telephony in the home as well here?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I was going to bring up, yeah.
It's the end.
Yeah, so again, as an equipment agnostic manufacturer, and I represent more the AnsLink part of the brand rather than the alarm side of the brand, and it's as critical to test the alarms that are being sold to service users with the ARC as well, to make sure that they work. Don't just assume that because you're told it will work, that it will work. It is important to test that and talk to us. You know, we want to make sure that what you're buying does work, and it does work reliably, and that's the most important thing about, I think, moving from analog to digital. It's the reliability of the service that you're selling and the reliability of the kit that you're selling, and it brings massive benefits to the industry. It brings massive benefits to the service users and massive benefits to the alarm receiving centres. But if we ignore the safety critical aspect of the industry that we're working, obviously we can encounter problems. So encourage everyone to make sure you test everything and make sure it's compliant with, not just with the ARC, but with the industry and the standards as well.
100%.
Yeah. Mark, I'd like to ask Trevor something. It's about analog calls into the monitoring centre. So at the moment, the majority of monitoring centres would have either analog lines or ISDN lines. And I would assume that by 2025, it's not just the homes that are being upgraded, but even the lines within the monitoring centres will have to be upgraded to SIP trunks. Correct, and what we see is that when we're testing, so when you test a BT or a Virgin, at the minute you were testing through to analog or ISDN lines, and so alarms will seem to work, but we've seen it sort of installed units that are going through to hosted platforms using SIP trunks, then them DTMF tonal protocols start to fail. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to sort of highlight this, because by doing testing through to the monitoring center that's got an analog or an ISDN line, there may be a false sense of security by people using analog devices and saying, oh yeah, well that's worked 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. But
actually, in the real world, when we move over to digital, then the failure rates are going to really increase.
They are. Totally agree with you. And you know, in our platforms, we've upgraded about 95% of our alarm receiving centres now to the latest version of AnsLink that now supports both analog alarms and IP alarms very, very reliably. And it's a combination of, it's a fine balance. You need to ensure that you still fully support analog alarm protocols, and I think it's well known in the industry that, you know, the analog alarms will work over a SIP infrastructure and over the IP infrastructure, but the biggest issue is reliability, and it's ensuring that we still offer a reliable service. And you know, the last thing we want is someone, worst case scenario, dying because we did something wrong. And as an industry, we can't take that risk, and you know, we need to be as risk averse as possible. So as a result of that, certainly at this moment in time with the AnsLink platform, we can still support an infrastructure that has a combination of both ISDN 30 and SIP infrastructure coming into our platform to do purely two things. Number one, still offer 100% reliable service for those people that are using analog alarms. And the vast majority of alarm receiving centres, the vast percentage of their alarms that they supply or that they support are still analog, not IP. But what we also do is we introduce SIP technology as well into the platform, so we have a reliable service for not just analog alarms, but also for IP alarms as well. And over a period of time, certainly 2025 and beyond, the reliance on ISDN 30 is going to diminish to absolutely nothing, and we're being forced to do that. It might not be through choice, we're being forced to do that because the industry is changing. we can only encourage, and I sit on both sides of the fence from an ARC perspective and a supplier perspective of digital alarms, because we do both. It's a worrying time, because there are so many alarm receiving centres out there that still have, vast majority of their alarms are still analog. So whilst we're in a great stage from an answering perspective, we've got several customers left to complete this upgrade. The biggest concern is the alarm units that are out there that are still analog, not our ARC. So we're not worried about the ARC. We can support a whole raft of analog alarms still, and we do very reliably. We can support a whole raft of IP alarms, whether they are our own alarms or other manufacturers' alarms, using open IP protocols. And again, they work extremely reliably, and remain equipment agnostic. And of course, we always will do.
No, but is it fair to say, Trevor and the rest of the panel, really, that your recommendation is that providers move to digital units as quickly as possible, and try and avoid that?
Absolutely.
Without a doubt.
I think everybody would agree with that.
Mark, you know, that we mustn't underestimate this either. You know, we when you calculate what needs to be done, we believe at Chip Tech there's still another 1.4 million to be updated. And you know, you do the maths in working days. You know, you're at 1,800 units a day. It's phenomenal. You know, it needs to be the industry priority. Period. It has to be. You know, the data sets that we get, and the great stuff that we're going to do with our AI and prevention, prediction, all this great stuff is going to come when we get the data. But we mustn't forget, and we must have it key. We got to get there. We've got to take the step change now. Legrand have done a fantastic job of upgrading their fleet on John Tech. The EMO platform's been upgraded. There's other things that happen on other platforms as well. Time is critical now, Mark. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do we think the blockages are that are holding back the transition?
Cost.
It's providers being wary of the cost and the implications for their business models. Is there anything on the supply side that's holding things up? I think I've heard that there've been component shortages that maybe have impacted manufacturing.
Yeah, there is. Now that we're in this digital market, we're also chasing the same components that automotive, white goods, computer manufacturers are chasing. So we're now into a different environment where the control of those chipsets, as we've probably all seen across the board here, were being held to ransom on in some cases, where something was $1 last week, but because there's a shortage of that and somebody has speculated on it, it's now $40 if you want to buy it, and it's a take it or leave it, because that to us is a huge impact on the cost of our product. But if you're turning out a Range Rover Sport at 100 grand, another $40, they'll eat it just to get that car down the line. So that's the marketplace that we're in, and it worries me that, you know, this timeline to change over is being pushed out, with the assumption by providers that we'll find the kit and get it to them when they need it. But even if we could, it's not the supply of the equipment, it's the actual physical activity of going out into the field, swapping a piece of kit over, and even if it's a Tunstall for Tunstall, you've still got to then learn in all of the other peripherals that they've got there, or Time Tech the same, Chubb, whoever. And that time frame to do that, Mark, you know, I mean, we did when I worked with you at Wellbeing a number of years ago, we did a digital swap out, well, no, it was an analog swap out of about 9,000 units across East Sussex. And that took us 2 years to complete, just because of the sheer workload, trying to book appointments, trying to get in front of the client. This is something which I don't think is really taken into account as to how that's going to drive this switch over the next couple of years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors really on the supply side and manufacturing side. But you know, again, just to emphasise that it's also with the providers to organise and it's not going to be easy. It isn't easy.
It isn't. I mean, one final point with regards to how you manage the costs on this side of it, and the model that the providers are going for again seems to be want to purchase this equipment outright. So it's a huge capital expenditure, which is probably the blocker for them in terms of being able to find $500,000, $1 million within their budget to be able to do this. The other approach is because this is digital product, and usually with digital product, they say if it's digital, or technical, then lease it, don't buy it. And the option is there with certainly with Chubb, and I'm sure with some of the other manufacturers, that we would be prepared to do leasing options and try to take some of the pain out of that huge slug of money that's going to be required to make that changeover quickly.
I think that's a good point, Mark. Rethink, as well as rethink what you're doing into digital, rethink how you're purchasing those things. And we certainly have conversations about leasing, but we also have the opposite. So we have conversations about a capital purchase that's going to last me 10 years. So different ends of the spectrum there. As suppliers, we need to be open to be supplying these in a different way also.
Okay, so support required across the industry, all sectors, to help this to happen.
Mark, I also think as well, there is a nervousness. There was some early movers in 21 in digital. We saw it at Chip Tech, and the hockey sticks gone massive. Some local authorities and some private based suppliers, they went digital. They went on the journey, often on their own, without lots and lots of guidance and things to follow that have been done. They've done a tremendously good job. I can tell you now for sure, as we bring on local authorities, it's so easy now. It's not hard. The movement from analog to digital is very simple, and the process, whether it's us, Chubb, Telealarm, Legrand, or Essence, or whoever, literally, if a customer decides they want that type of kit, you come in, you help them, you explain what digital is, you map all the alarms, you train the people. Literally, you can go digital once that monitoring platform is done. Yeah. And they're mature now. That there's no faults there. They're mature devices. You're in it. It's a 2-week job. Not even that really to get somebody digital. I think there's a lot of learning that can be done from those that have gone through it, not just the product suppliers. There's lots of sharing that can be done.
But I think, David, that we've already gone through the hardships from the first installations that we were doing with the different monitoring centres, and realising that the sort of configuration is slightly different between each monitoring centre. So, but now it's like, right, okay, is it a John Tech? Is it an UMO platform? And you've just got a suite of settings that will work. You test them and say, right, okay, well, we'll, like you said, we'll do our own customer acceptance test where we test every alarm type, every technical message, and say we're good to go. It takes a bit of time, but it gives everybody confidence that the kit's working.
Okay, thank you, guys. We got some questions from delegates, and observations, which before we maybe move on to the next question, which has got a slightly different flavour to it. Maybe we could just to get some answers. So Mark Williams has asked a question: is there an opportunity and appetite for manufacturers to get together and create a transparent testing program that is publicly available, which tests in real world environments against multiple protocols? I think I've been gathering there's a bit of frustration that the information about what's been tested and what works is quite fragmented, and not particularly helpful. And you mentioned some organisations, provider organisations, going and doing their own testing. Have the panel got a view on that? Perhaps if
I've got a view. I think first and foremost, there are open and published ratified protocols that everyone adheres to and everyone follows. And I think it's only those that deviate from those ratified protocols that encounter problems. So there is something already in place, and it has been been in place for several years now. So if you go away and create a proprietary protocol, of course, more testing's got to be done, because you've got to test, with the ARC and with the different ARC to make sure that those protocols do work, but also make sure that those protocols are shared and available.
I mean, I think partly this includes the resilience of analog signaling across the new digital network. Is there anything that you can point providers to?
Mark, there's been some talk within some different, or with the TSA potentially there might be some. Maybe it's something that UK telehealthcare want to do. From a chip tech perspective, 100%. If we can have a central place where we can have our results, and that's not just in protocols. Let's actually publish all of the accreditation that we have against the relevant standards that's required for social alarms as well. They should be visible, they should be open. Of course, we have these in our own portals for people to see, but why not? It should be open everywhere. I think it just needs a central place, non-product manufacturer related, to say, right, I'm going to get that and make it available. So perhaps something UK telehealthcare can provide to its members.
Yeah,
we provide it, no problem.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to providers to see something that's kind of independent and thorough around analog resilience and new digital connectivity as well.
Yes, same with the monitoring protocols. They're published, but we all go through them. We've recently completed some work over with the CareNet system. So again, a very good program of testing was taking place, very thorough, and all completed, ticking the box. Let's get that published in a centralized place for everybody to see. Why not? So you're only going to one place to get the answer that you need. We're all for that.
Okay. So maybe some work to do on that between everyone. Okay, thank you. So there was a question about leasing from James Lampert, following up, I think, on something you said, Sean. So from James, just interested in the leasing conversation. We heard from Sean at Chubb that's an option. What's the position from others on the call? So should Trevor?
Yeah, absolutely. There are options. I would guess from every manufacturer to capital purchase, to lease purchase, or otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not something we've done yet, but we have been discussing it, so I think it will be an option.
Yeah, and I guess that could be a way for providers to mitigate some of the cost pressures at the front end of this.
I think it's just an understanding whether it's a lease or a rental, Mark. We've engaged with a leasing company, and it's something that we can offer, just like Sean mentioned before. On a lease based, essentially, there's a loan that's taken place between public sector and a third party. So you bring in a third party into the loop. So is it lease where you're doing that, or is it a rental where actually there's a recurring payment that's being paid directly to the manufacturer, and actually the credit facility that sits in it sits within that supply chain instead? So two different models there that need to be considered. And but look, I mentioned at the very start, and this innovation isn't always technology. Innovation sits around process, how we buy, all sorts of stuff. So we're open to that, if people want to explore it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people can see the webinar chat, but interesting from Aaron about the blockages, which confirms some of the things that perhaps we were thinking, and Sean mentioned. So cost, clearly, big blocker for people, I guess. Not having faith in the equipment being able to work appropriately. But the interesting thing here, and I think it is important, is lastly, which Sean was saying, these are big projects potentially. Project management expertise, migration is a huge series of interrelated projects that need appropriate expertise. So thanks for that, Aaron. That's really helpful. Okay, so we got half an hour left, and I think Trevor will need some time to wrap up. So just to, as I say, slightly move the emphasis of the discussion. A question from Kevin McSorley at Radius Housing, Radius Connect 24, which is, how do you ensure we don't just move analog service models to a digital platform? So this is the other side of the coin, isn't it? The kind of positive potential of digital transformation to develop new integrated service models. And I'm seeing that after quite a gap, commissioners are talking about asking providers to bid for integrated service models, and a lot of what Aaron's been talking about is moving towards integration, so including telehealth, ADL applications, and also integrating tech systems with mainstream care systems. So can I throw that initially to you, Trevor, just to have a start on that, as to how the Grand are supporting via your equipment and your services and your monitoring centre systems, how you're hoping to support providers and commissioners to move towards more integrated next generation service model.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I shall certainly give it a go. So, there's a very clear need that there's an emerging change and an emerging need for care models to change. It's very apparent with customers that we speak to. Only yesterday I was with a customer who's actually done some work themselves, having upgraded their AnsLink platform to a digital platform, and they're monitoring many thousands of alarm units out there, some analog and some IP. And I'd like to echo what Aaron said as well earlier was, yes, everyone wants to change, or there may be a need for change, but it's difficult to make that change and change your business model until you've actually moved to a digital platform. If you're stuck in the world of analog still, it's very difficult to see what benefits you can get from going to a digital platform or even digital alarm units. So once you move to a digital platform, there's a whole host of data that's in that platform. But again, exactly as Aaron said, that data is only as good as the data that's in there. So if you put bad data in, you're going to get bad data out. So there's an opportunity here to actually reduce the number of call actions, call reasons, the amount of information that goes into the data, make it more goes into the platform, make it more meaningful. Very interesting to see again Aaron's slide on that and what's trying to be pushed through to the Wales government, stamped and approved. That would be great, something like that. And if you get different service providers using that similar model in conjunction with digital alarm units, then we have a whole amount of data that can be shared and it is useful. We have a BI dashboard within the Tytech Reach IP units called Pulse, the cloud management portal. And that BI dashboard is now collecting a massive amount of data from the alarms, from connectivity to how often they are used, any uptimes, any downtimes, what alerts are sent from the system. And we're getting information from digital alarm units now that we never ever had or could have ever dreamt of having when it was analog equipment. So having a combination of a digital alarm receiving center and digital alarm units and absolute interoperability between systems, it's all well and good having this information in our platform or any other alarm receiving center platform or in our portal or any other. But if there's no means of sharing that data with third-party organisations such as the NHS, such as housing associations, such as care providers, then what use is that data to anybody? Now, I was working, like I say, I had a meeting yesterday with one of our customers and one of our BDMs, and they have a digital AnsLink platform. They are monitoring digital alarms, and they've been commissioned to go out into the community and do some additional work themselves by their own organisation to look at prevention of falls, preventing people going into hospitals and stopping hospital visits or healthcare professional visits, and they've succeeded with very impressive results in doing that. But the problem they've got is they are paying for that, not the NHS and not the care providers themselves. They funded that themselves. So it's getting that funding now in talking to third-party organisations to help with that funding, to stop people going into hospital, stop them going into care. And again, as Aaron again said earlier, it's a great presentation. It's things in there that we're talking about all the time. It's about keeping people independently living in their homes for much longer, safely and securely as well.
Okay.
So
I may
that's
come into that. Sorry, Trevor, I thought you were...
Karen,
if I can come into that slightly, Mark, just it's an important string to our bow at Essence, is that kind of stuff. So our telecare hub has the ability to run several different services. So we deliberately build it multifunctional. So all of that ADL work is available through your normal telecare hub, remote patient management, clinical, and also some wellness parts around that is all part of the major hub there. So we're aggregating a lot of data, which is introducing some AI chatbots that work through some well-being, and as well as some clinical question trees about what's available. If you're going to have a speaker and a microphone in your bungalow, it may as well do a lot more stuff. And perhaps what's kind of unique about what we do is we don't have an affiliation to any particular call center or call center software. So we can present that at the call center, but we're also more than happy as open and functional APIs to present that wherever it wants to go. So all of us on this call here are very in-depth in what we do, but perhaps what we do is a very important but niche area. So the bigger the data pot that we can put all of that information in, we feel is very important. So I like Trevor says, that preventative stuff as well as the reactive stuff of, yes, this person's had a fall, but what was their blood pressure, temperature before that? How often have they used the bathroom before they got to that point? Is very important on preventative, but also important on that as people get discharged as part after a blue light situation that we all know about because it goes through to the grand centre. What led up to it and what care package do we put in place as we put people back into where they live? Very important. And we don't see ourselves as the be all and end all of that data. So we have to be open and honest about where we're going to share all of that information with. So APIs is very important there.
I think it's
and we're all technology providers, and we're all in this industry to make sure that the service users out there have the best lives that they can. You know, ultimately at some point in our lives, we may be in that position ourselves. So we want to offer the best opportunities available to people. The difficulty we have, and others may agree or may disagree, is whilst some service providers have that ambition, many others don't. Many others just want to do a transition from analog to digital. They don't want to take on the extra services. They don't want to transform the service. A lot of people see this purely as an exercise, as a costly exercise as well in many cases, that they're being forced down a route that they didn't particularly want to go down. And they're having to have a digital platform, and they're having to have digital alarms, and they just want to run the service exactly as they ran it as an analog alarm service. And I think that's quite a shame for organisations that will still operate in that way, because there's a huge opportunity for service providers and alarm receiving centres alike and housing associations to benefit from what we have to offer. It's technology, it's software. Ultimately, you can do whatever you want with software. There has to be a desire for who we're supplying it to actually change and grow with that as well, and adapt to its capabilities.
Okay, thank you. David, were you about to chip in there?
Yeah, I think, but the point I want to kind of make with this is that, we've got to be careful that there isn't a like for like from analog to digital, but there's a lot of work still to be done with digital, and there's a few blockers, I think, currently in the way. So the stuff that Aaron was showing yesterday, the work that he's doing, just before with the work that he's doing in Wales is absolutely bob on. You've got to get the data set right. There is, and I've been in the industry for a while. I've seen so many systems come to market, and they work independently, and they provide some outcomes, but the data set that you get in them is a little bit rich, but not rich enough. It's not rich enough. So the two key things that need to happen here is that we need common data set that sits actually with outside a social alarm protocol, which is more of a cause and effect protocol, the way that I see it. There's so much more data that we can send. It's got to be common. It's got to be managed. But then that second part of it is pure interoperability between devices, and that's not just social alarms. That's Me Watch. That's it doesn't a pendant Argo device. It doesn't we mentioned healthcare devices before as well. all of that has got to come together, and it's got to sit not just in a JOMSEC platform or in a PMC or in a CareNet system or an UMO or a SCAR response system or whatever. That's got to sit above. So data to these monitoring platforms in to an area there where you're getting rich loads and loads and loads of data, that there ultimately is going to change the way that we deliver health and social care. It's going to keep people safer. It's going to put data into pharmaceuticals as well. That's what we need to be aiming for. So bit of work to do, but I'll say that the stuff that Aaron was showing before, really good start of that, but a bit of a way to go.
Yeah, thank you, David. Sean, you're across systems and equipment. What's your thoughts on this?
The number of elements here that are coming together that we would never have got within the analog community, but now that we are digital, there is, as David, as Aaron mentioned, a lot of additional inputs that we can take to what's happening around a person's day-to-day life. That is now, it's data, but it's just data, it's points. It doesn't mean anything unless you can actually then do something smart with it. So there needs to be, in addition to what's being collected, some form of AI or analytics engine, which then needs to troll through this data to provide meaningful information. So what in my simple view of the world is, and it's a very simple analogy that I'll use, is that you have a PIR within a property. You get a number of activities being registered from that on a daily basis, somebody walking past it. If you've got an ability to be able to collect that data, then store it against an individual person, build up a pattern of what's happened over the last 30 days in terms of their activity levels throughout the day at different points of the day, and then be able to then measure the next 24 hours against the last 30 days on a rolling basis, you will see changes in activity levels, which at the moment are hidden to us, because nobody's got the time to sit there and eyeball this type of data and try to make out what pattern of activity is happening with each individual person. But those elements of a digital hub, being able to relay inputs from a set of sensors through whether it's VPN or whether it's a broadband connection, into an analytics engine, which they can then make sense of that and present it back in a dashboard. That for me is my goal with the way that we're knitting together different elements and best in class services and solutions out there in the marketplace.
Okay. If anybody wants to have a discussion about how we do that, I'm happy to discuss it. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. So, I mean, really, to develop these next generation service models, it's really about everybody getting together, isn't it? Tech providers, the manufacturers, the systems providers, but also very importantly, leaders in NHS and social care, because there's not much point doing all this work and creating these models.
I think that's the problem, that as a manufacturer, we don't particularly have that because we're not dealing with the NHS, with the different divisions of care like the alarm receiving centre are. But there is a disconnect, and there's I think it's quite often looked down on, the technology that we do and the service that's provided in our sector, as it's something that the council normally deals with, so we won't worry about it in the NHS. And I think that perception has to care. This is a life critical service that is offered extremely well for many, and has been for many years, and very successfully. And trying to get that collaboration between the local government and the local NHS and the CCG and so on is quite difficult to achieve, because it ultimately all comes down to budget. Who's going to pay for what? Because no one wants to pay for it, does it?
Trevor, you're dead right. I've been in this industry now I was working out the other day, 15 years, and that divide between social care and healthcare I still can't see it being bridged at the moment. There's talk about it, and there has been talk for a number of years, but and the budget of what we do within social care compared to the NHS is minuscule. and yet, you know, nothing comes back the other way. And you know, the industry we're in, bang for your buck. You know, I don't think there's anything delivers care or support for the investment that's made into it in social care. I don't think there's a, you know, an equivalent within the healthcare division.
Totally agree.
Yeah, but this is where we're relying on, you know, UK telehealth, TSA, to really drive that conversation and to do that link between what we do in social care every day and healthcare, and for healthcare to appreciate and understand the benefits that we can deliver at this level to help prevent, you know, our clients presenting at accident emergency when it gets expensive for everybody at all levels.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's the right question from Kevin, and there is a danger, isn't there, that we just carry on replicating what we're doing in a digital world, we're doing in the analog world. So, you know, hopefully these discussions will help to move things on, and I see there's some helpful comments coming in through the chat, so that we can build on. So thanks for that. Just one more question that we received, and it's sort of related to this really, which was from Jeanette at NRS Healthcare, which is the question is the ethical question. What is the in regards to how data is used and stored, and clearly, you know, we are generating through these digital applications more and more personal data about people's lifestyles, their health, etc. So I guess it's always been important, always will be important, but possibly it's becoming an even bigger issue now with the digital upgrades. Sean, you volunteered to lead on this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, digital data, it's not new. I mean, we've had digital data stored against us since the 60s, really. And then through the mid-90s, with the growth of the internet, that data has been shared. Now, what's at the back of people's minds probably are those breaches where, you know, significant data has been either maliciously shared or unintentionally shared. You know, BA, for example, when it lost all that customer data with all the financial details, didn't go down too well, which was unintentional, but it was a breach. And it was because they didn't have processes in place that protected that correctly. Then you have the other end of the scale, like Cambridge Analytica, who, if you can remember, guys, it was them that was delving into about 80 odd million client details of Facebook to be able to develop an understanding of how people thought with regards to voting in the United States, which could or could not have put Trump in place and where he is. That was obviously malicious, and it was it's cost Facebook quite a lot of money. I think they've just settled out of court for about 750 million, which would crucify our industry, but it's probably peanuts to Facebook. So in the back of our minds, we've got this view that, you know, data can be misused, and within our industry that we're in now, and as it's moving more and more digital, then the opportunity for data, as we're creating more of it, could be misappropriated. Now, within the UK, we've got the GDPR Act that came in 2018. So that put in place, you know, requirements for each of us as organizations handling data in terms of what we can and can't do with that data. So we are under regulation as it is already. But just being under regulation is one thing. I mean, what we really need as businesses moving forward is for each of us to have a clear, transparent rules in place of how we will collect that data, store it, and then share it, so that when customers, clients sign up with each of us, that they're aware it's front and foremost in their mind what we're going to do with data that we do collect. But because we've now got systems in place as well, which are a combination of different elements. So you have a digital hub in a house, which is connected to the internet. You've then got a link between that hub and a contact center. You've then got a contact center, which is open to the internet. You might use an analytics platform, which sits outside of the contact center. And again, that's open to the internet. It's really about that system then and about the integrity of that system that needs to be tested, penetration tested, needs to be understood, and it needs to be continually monitored for weak spots. Because if we're going to protect the data that we have within these systems, then we need to understand how each of those systems integrate, where the weak spot is, and make sure that we identify it before somebody else gets in there and does that for us.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Are there any other thoughts from the panel about how the suppliers can help providers of services manage the data properly?
Not really, Mark. You know, it's got to be well governed, and it's everyone's responsibility who's in the chain. Sean's bang on. You know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're close to wrapping up now. As I say, there are some quite a number of observations in the webinar chat, which will be useful for you to look at. Just one I missed out on earlier, which was from David Cross. It goes back to the testing and the upgrade of the telecom system. David, it also has to be pointed out that the tests are only as good as the day they are tested on, also known as your car's MOT. The goalposts and parameters will and do change, including by all of the telcos who are encouraging everyone to test and then change their network configurations on a regular basis. I guess just to wrap up, that's a bit of a government health warning, isn't it? To everybody.
David's right. It's not just a day, Mark. It's the time of day. You know, the way that signals get changed and the gap between the dial tones.
Yeah.
If you're trying to put that mimic and change it through an AD, that change is dependent on the level of traffic and whereabouts it's sitting on the network as well. So there's all sorts of bits there. David's absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one to wrap up.
Yeah.
Really,
which really comes back round to, you know, what do we need to do? We need to move to digital sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, panel. That was brilliant, and thank you to everybody who's chipped in as we've gone along and left their contact details, etc., for further development of the discussion, and that's really helpful. So thank you once again. If I can hand back to Trevor to wrap the 2 hours up. Thank you.
Terence, I think it is. I'm happy to do it for you, Terence, if you want me to. But...
No, it's to Jerry. Thank you, Trevor, anyway.
Trevor, was it? Did I not say? Did I say?
Yeah, he said Trevor.
Not to worry.
Thank you very much, Mark, for hosting that session. That's been really useful. And thank you, first of all, to our earlier presenters and to all our panelists as well. I'm Jerry Allmark. I'd like to, as I said, thank everyone who took part today, and particularly the delegates as well, and to actually interact and ask the questions. My takeaways from today, and I think it has been a very, very interesting session for me, but the flavour was set really, I think, at the beginning with Aaron Edwards from Tech Cymru, when he said, you can't get to the next generation of telecare without digitising. And I think that set the flavour for today. We have to look ahead. We have to look to the future. We have to look to how we all work together to move into this new digital world. So thank you for that, Aaron. It's a really strong message. And that carried on through really with Catherine Scott from Progress Lifeline. And when Catherine talks about a large ARC service that is on their digital journey, and I think that's your message to all those services. There's a digital journey. It's not something that'll happen overnight. And we've seen stages of this all the way through the conversation. The message from Kim was quite interesting with regard to their prescription compliance services in the Nordics. and Scandinavia. And my particular part of that interest was around when Kim talked about using that sort of prescription compliance to aid early discharge and stop readmissions and admissions to hospitals, particularly given the fact that, you know, we're looking at really serious winter pressures this year, ambulances sitting outside hospitals, hospital beds being full. So anything we can do to work with not just social care, but NHS and bring those things together, I think is an important message. So thank you for that, Kim. From the panel session, I think the first thing was around cost. And this is always the question that we at UK Telehealthcare have from the providers. You know, how are we going to afford this? Where are the budgets? Is there extra funding, which there isn't, we know. But there were some really interesting propositions put forward from the suppliers. You looked around how added value services like remote monitoring, remote maintenance of equipment could bring down the cost, even though the initial outlay would be higher, that digital could bring down the cost in the operational side of the activities. And I think that came true from a number of the suppliers. And I think that's really relevant, that we don't look at just the disadvantages of the cost, but the advantages of using digital to bring down the operational costs. So thank you for that. And we also looked at and the flexibility of purchase, whether that be lease or other partnership activities that you can offer. And I would like to say to the panel, you all come of it from a commercial angle. You've got your businesses there and your products and services. But thank you today for sharing your experience, because I know all of you really well and you've got a wealth of experience. So you actually shared that and just not the commercial aspect. And I really, really appreciate that. We also talked about the importance of testing. And I think one of the questions, as you see on the chats from Mark Williams, and I think it really hits the nail on the head. We keep talking about this testing, and we really do need to understand what works, what doesn't work, what we really do need not to have in the system anymore, and how we move to those digital platforms. And I think that's something that we need to really drill down on in the next few months, not in the year, because 2025 ain't that far away, but already we see that shift. And then finally, from the panelists, we talked about big data, data analytics, and health informatics, and how important that is. But I think it was David who mentioned it's a journey. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but it's certainly a journey we all need to work towards. And I think that was that came across from all the panel as well. We see that as the goal, how we use that data, and to drill into the ethical issues around that at this early stage. I think that's really important as well, because we don't want to wait till the fact that we're collecting this data before we know how it's going to be controlled, who the data controllers are, how we deal with it in terms of having public and confidence within health and social care as well in the data we collect through technology. That leads us really into our next event, which is on the 25th, Wednesday, the 25th of January at 11 o'clock, which really takes us to the second part of this panel session today, where we have BT, Virgin, TalkTalk, NHS England, Openreach, Tex UK, DCMS, Farpoint, and the Local Government Association. So we really pick up on a lot of the questions we raised today. So I hope you can join us for that event. The event will be facilitated by Steve Smith, who's one of the directors from Tex Advisory, as Mark is. And we look forward to welcoming you then. So if you haven't registered yet, or if you have colleagues who might be interested, please do register. Please do send your questions in if you haven't sent questions in yet. And we look forward to carrying on the debate then. In the meantime, thank you to everyone for attending today. Keep warm, and we'll see you on the 25th. Thank you. Bye.